What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is the first part of a story where Issei was betrayed and fused with Ophis. After a verbal lashing from Rias and the other members of the peerage, Issei finally snaps, leaving the group in an explosive manner. After surviving being separated from the Welsh Dragon, he, as well as the Vali group, journey the world with a new goal, one that could bring them face to face with the entirety of every religion in existence. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. Now, let's get into part 1. Betrayal and Rebirth. Hey Issei. The beautiful young woman with snow-white skin, sapphire eyes, and gorgeous red hair dressed in her school uniform, currently had her back turned to the boy, unable to see his face and him hers. However, the sudden change in the atmosphere told him that something had changed. Now that he thought of it, his heartbeat was faster than normal. He placed his hand over chest to feel the thunderous beat within, wondering what the cause of it was. "Yeah?" he asked. "What exactly am I to you?" she asked, her voice slightly lower than normal. This question, seemingly harmless, was enough for Issei to lean back onto the balls of his feet. Where was this coming from? Hasn't he always told her since he first rescued her from the arranged marriage with Rias? "I would have done anything to get you back safely. Then I will give up my other arm, and then my eyes if I have to. I will do whatever it takes. Nothing is going to stop me. I am your pawn after all." He had been there when he was needed, always. It was him that saved her from being Rias's trophy wife, he who fought by her side during the battle with Kakabiel, fought and endured numerous raiding games for her, struggled against the Nordic god of mischief, suffered through the impalement he received from Fenrir, the list went on. While anyone in the peerage would, and have, in some cases, done the same, save the part about embalming the wedding between his king and the flaming turkey, he went through quite the number of tough times for her. Ever since she brought him back to life, he had to witness the murder of his best friend Asia, sacrificed his arm during his battle with Rias, fought with Tannen, a literal full-grown ex-dragon king to get stronger for her, died to a Nordic wolf, and almost kicked the bucket again when he was lost in the depths of his own negative emotions after Asia got beamed to the dimensional gap. Activating the juggernaut drive and placing everyone in grave danger, himself included. Was that not enough? Was all he could say. His head began to cloud with worry and confusion, his already accelerated heart rate beating faster and harder as a foreign emotion constricted it. "What am I?" The elevated volume forced the boy to jump off the ground slightly. Did she really have no idea after all they had been through? Issei's eyes welcomed darkness as his lids blocked reality from view, teeth gnashing away at each other without notice. Why couldn't she just see it? I am your pawn after all. Did she want more? Was she trying to tell him something? There are 3 men in the peerage. Kiba, him, and Gasper, even though he doesn't act like one just yet. Rias treats everyone like a genuine member of her family, yet, Kiba and Gasper don't get the same attention as he does. She also has a deep desire for romance, probably had it since before he even entered Kuo, hell, possibly longer than that since devils live almost forever. But, even with that, she doesn't try to have sex with either Kiba or Gasper. He was the only one that had been offered her virginity. Is she in love with me? No. There isn't any question about it. She is in love with me. If he was being honest with himself, he felt the same. Issei Haidu did not just Rias Gremory. President of the Occult Research Club and his king, Rias Gremory. A proud and noble albeit somewhat selfish woman. There was no way he would go through the vast lengths he has for her if there was nothing between them. So, what was the big problem? He loves her and she loves him. All he had to do was to say the word she wanted to he. "Would you die for me?" There it was. The 5 words that cast him into the supernatural world, that shattered his trust like fragile glass, the reason why his true feelings will remain forever locked in the deepest confines in his heart. He literally died when he attempted to let someone in the first time. What would happen the second time? Would you die for me? What about Rias? Surely, he could trust himself to her. Right. Would you die for me? What about the others? Kaneko, Akeno, Asia. Maybe Gasper and Kiba. Would you die for me? Well. What about his parents? They were the ones that raised him after all. Would you die for me? Is there anyone at all, that he can trust himself to? Would you die for me? The lengthy silence took place within him as Issei fought bravely against his reluctance, desperately wanting someone to see the true him. A man who is simply hurting deep inside, rather than the mask of a pervert he always wore. The entire peerage looked on with hopeful expressions on their faces. Every girl present knew that if any of them wanted any chance to be with the man they grew to love, he had to realize his own feelings for Rias. If he couldn't even see what he meant to her after everything they have been through. What were the chances of him realizing what he meant to them? To me. The president will always be the president. A single voice, almost inaudible, cut through the quiet clubroom. Issei's head hung low as the words struggled to be vocalized. "You idiot." Rias cried, rushing out of the room, two damp trails slowly slithering down her cheeks as she did so. The tic-tac of her heels on the hardwood outside the room echoed in his ears. Unable and unwilling to remove his gaze from the carpet below, the sound bounced around in his head, each bounce constricting his already tightened heart. Why was he getting called an idiot? She had asked him a question and he answered with all the honesty he could muster. Yet, she still got upset. Why? Because he didn't give her what she wanted. Rooted to the spot, the only movement he performed was twisting his neck in the direction Rias had stormed off. She wanted him to acknowledge the feelings she knew he had for her. And he refused. It was an unforgivable sin. But to insult him. After everything they have been through. Issei. You are horrible. This is too much. Why can't you? Why can't you understand one Isama's feelings? Asia, the girl who he had come to see as a sister, scolded him harshly. A creaking sound, a flash of blonde hair, more creaking, and a subtle click followed by more heels on wood, signaled her departure. This time, the object of the room's disapproval turned to watch the blonde as she left, an unknown sensation stirring within his bosom. Her too. He didn't even do anything to her. At least. He thought. Why can't you understand my feelings? Bum. Suddenly, the confused and disheartened male grasped at his chest in a shocked pain. His heart. It hurt. A dark and violent thing clawed and scratched away at it, like a hand made from the blackest darkness, slowly choking the thin sack of tissue that made living possible. That wasn't right, Ice Kun. A more masculine voice sighs, the owner giving Issei a dirty look with his arms folded, seemingly unaware of the pain Issei was currently going through. You don't have the right to talk to me about being right or not. Bum. There it was again. That undesirable feeling that stuck knives into the very pits of his soul. This wasn't any normal kind of pain, it honestly felt like something was attempting to pull his heart out through his ribs. It is only natural for Rias and Asia to get mad. Another voice spoke, this time Akeno. Was she also trying to reprimand him? It is only natural for me to get mad. Bum. Damn it, again. Every time this pain announced itself, Issei's eyes scrunched shut and his breathing became less and less natural. What made the devil and further confused was that despite the rather obvious signs of enormous pain, not a single one of them seemed to realize it. They just continued to belittle him about things they didn't fully understand, acting as if they didn't even see suffering he was in, physical or emotional. Even I, who is dense at these sorts of things, thought you were a bit off, Ice. Zenobia contributed, her hair flowing freely as her head shook in disappointment. You weren't even fucking here, what the hell gives you the right? Bum. Irk. Each time his heart lurched, the agony grew worse and worse. Now Issei was actually grasping the area over his heart, panting like a husky in the summer. Moo. Ice Kun sure is a no-no. Poor Rias-san. You too. Irina. Bum. HNN. He was even whimpering at this point. What the fuck was causing all of this pain? Was this torturous sensation because of the belittlement everyone was dead set on giving him? Sure, the words were like knives, but the pain couldn't solely be just from that. Issei glanced over at Kaneko, expecting her to say something as well. If everyone is going to belittle him, then he wanted to hear what everyone had to say. Oddly enough, however, the smallest female in the room didn't say anything. Her scrunched eyebrows, pursed lips, and set jaw creating quite a frightening glare. This intense gaze wasn't directed at the resident harem King Wanab, taking her time to look every other member in the eyes to convey her evident disapproval. If any one of them noticed, they showed no noticeable reaction from Kaneko's ire. Issei glanced over at Gasper, hoping. Nope, no such luck. He was hiding in his box, but despite this, the look in his eye was noticeably darker. The Red Dragon Emperor tossed Kaneko another glance to affirm his suspicions, the female now leering at Gasper with a silent anger. She does understand. A thin shard of light pierced the darkness that had begun to cloud his mind. Makes sense, I guess. Rias did have her observing me since day one after all. Reg. That single ray of light within his psyche became even more luminescent as the clouds obscuring his mind grew darker and darker by the second. Why would you answer? Are you also upset with me? You, who has been with me since the very beginning. You, of all people, should understand. Biting back the sourness, he stood impatiently as he scowled at his hand, failing to comprehend how the one individual closest to him for so long couldn't even utter a single word in his defense or otherwise. So that is how it is. Kaneko's tiny ray of hope barely stood a chance against the betrayal and rage, attempting to crush his very spirit. The vile, invisible waves of absolute disgust lashing out from the tormented boy seeped over Kaneko's senses, barely fighting the urge to flee in terror from the enraged dragon that stood in such close proximity. Unsure if she was exempt from his anger, Kaneko hesitantly shuffled her away to his side, wrapping her tiny hand around his soft skin in an attempt to comfort him, not sure of what to say to the livid creature. Issei glowered at the hand currently resting on his arm for only a second before traveling into her honey golden eyes. They held the gaze for seconds before the smallest of grins pierced Issei's scowl. Relief could not even begin to explain the overwhelming emotions that were happening inside the yokai. Certain that she was not one of the recipients of the intense hatred that slithered across the room, the almost irresistible desire to sprint as fast as she possibly could vanished. Replaced by a healthy warmth across her face and a pounding in her bosom. On with a grin, Issei intermingled his fingers with Kaneko's, a slight tug notifying her of his intentions. They began moving towards the exit, the same door Asia and Rias fled through, acknowledging the fact that attempting to speak to the rest of the peerage would only prove to be a fruitless endeavor. Just as they were about to depart, however, a busty female with long black hair tied into a ponytail blocked their path. The current ice con will just hurt her more, even if you go after her. Bum. You dare. The free hand that hung by his side slowly balled into a fist, his arm shaking as his sheer overwhelming emotions began to take control of the Dragon Emperor. The crippling pain deep in his heart, body and soul, certainly failing to help ease the torrent of feelings born from broken trust and rage. You dare lecture me. Insult me. Verbally harass me. Now you won't even let me leave. Why? To lecture me some more. A heavy silence thicker than peanut butter draped the room all of them were in before a younger voice spoke out for the first time during this meeting. This is my mother's and my fault, isn't it? Ravel asked, the miniature civil war currently taking place forcing butterflies down her throat as the phoenix tried to understand exactly what was happening here. No. Issei betrayed no emotion as he interrupted Akeno before she could even begin to reply, her mouth already open and ready to answer the question. This isn't your fault, Ravel. Everyone in the room became very confused, no one dared to move or so much as whisper. Only the inhales and exhales reached the ears of Kiba, Gasper, Zenobia, Akeno, and Arena. Unknowingly thinking the same thing, everyone but Issei, Kaneko, and Ravel began to wonder, hoping. Does Issei know why we are doing this? Does he truly? If so, is it okay for him to leave? Drawn out of their thoughts, Issei continued to speak, ignorant and uncaring of their mental questions. This is not your fault, Ravel. Issei repeated, his voice growing hoarser and hoarser as he continued to speak, lips trembling as he feebly attempted to control himself. This is their fault. All of them. What? Gasper squeaked from his box before quickly retreating into the cardboard enclosure, afraid that since he actively spoke against Issei, he would be mad at him. Gasper didn't agree with what Issei was doing, but that didn't mean he wanted to be on his bad side. Will you die for me? Would you care to repeat that? Kiba growled as he drew a wholly demonic sword from a summoned magic circle by his waist, the blade only the size of a standard knife. He knew full well that he was going to get yelled at by Rias just for drawing his blade in the first place, however, Issei's ignorance was proving too much for the blonde knight to tolerate. Perhaps a smaller weapon would lessen his king's wrath. Will you die for me? Mind telling us how your ill manners and inexperience are our fault? Zenobia also stepped forward alongside her fellow knight, no so much as daring to draw Durandal despite her desire to. As much as she wanted to pound some sense into their dumb friend's skull, she still had trouble controlling its aura. If she pulled it out in a heavy populated area without their lives on the line. She was not willing to find out what the repercussions would be. Akeno also remained silent, the crackling of lightning that danced over her skin, and the roar of thunder it came with did all the talking for her. Kaneko, sensing the inevitable conflict, raised her fists as two furry objects popped out of her head, and an equally fluffy appendage grew out of the back of her skirt. Will you die for me? Guys. Small beads of sweat fell from the angel's forehead, slowly distancing herself from the powering up members of the devil household. The hesitant action drew the attention of the two rebelling members of the orc, Issei's eyes softening somewhat as Kaneko made sure to remember her hesitation and apparent lack of knowledge of her friend's actions. What are you guys doing? I thought we were just going to talk this out. Talking won't make him understand. Zenobia growled, her resolve hardening as a faint but growing wide aura spread from her body, coating herself in holy energy. If I have to give him anything, it is his prowess in a fight. Maybe crossing our blades will make him understand. Make me understand. The Red Dragon Emperor, who had remained silent for the most part, spoke with an odd calm tone that greatly disturbed everyone in the room, his eyes hidden beneath the wild hair. Will you die for me? First, Press and Asia run out of the room. Will you die for me? Then you guys antagonize me. Will you die for me? Now you intend to fight me. Will you die for me? Before, the whispering in the back of his head had been just that, a whisper. Now, that small question that was causing him so much suffering was beginning to grow louder. Each time those words echoed inside his brain, that gut-wrenching pain returned greater than what his was before. He couldn't keep this up. Will you die for me? Issei-kun. Akeno finally spoke, a tone of finality in her voice. You said that this was our fault. But the fault for Rias and Asia's anger towards you is nothing but. I will not die for you. Issei roared suddenly but viciously, all of the pain that he was feeling, every single putrid emotion coursing through him, condensed into a single, resolved cry that ripped into the ears of everyone in and out of the clubroom. Welsh Dragon balance breaker. Unable to hold back anymore, the boy's aura exploded out in a violent boom, blowing everyone but Kaneko away, the yokai still grasping his arm for dear life. The aura that poured out of him traveled down his body instantly, flashing across his arm and jumped onto Kaneko's, covering her figure in his crimson hatred. The ceiling overhead ripped away from the walls as they bent under the sheer force of his fiery outburst. The hallway quickly rendered little more than tatters from the sudden devastating increase in power. Issei, noticing that the fallen figures were already getting up, did not allow them to voice their questions, growling as the blood-red energy surrounding him clung to the armor that had manifested around him like a lethal flame. Why? The dead, frigid voice asked no one in particular. Why is it always the people I trust? Blade. Without a single utterance, the Crimson Dragon Slayer Ascalon quickly protruded from the boosted gear, an unnatural shade of draconic aura, swallowing the sword eerily as it billowed and swayed in an invisible, unfeeling gust. The peerage could do nothing but stare at the very ominous appearance of the Welsh Dragon in shock and fear as the murderous intentions of the creature of legend washed over them like ice water. First it was her. Now it is you. That cold and lifeless voice differed greatly from the red-hot rage burning in and around him, not even the air itself was spared from its molestation. Such a voice matched with that appearance was very unsettling. How did this happen? No other thoughts could be made audible within the peerage's minds, even the Nekomata felt unable to aid the unnerving situation or appease her allies' wrath. Releasing her shaking arms, soaked with sweat, from the red dragon's forearm, she cautiously eyed the glowing blade as she slowly retreated, the slow steps quickly sprinting, as the dragon took no notice of her, fear and concern taking over. I need to get help. Before Issei-senpai does something he could regret. Issei. What are you? Playing? Before Kiba could even finish his question, Issei seemed to phase out of existence, only to reappear in front of the poor knight, Ascalon already mid-swing. It took all of the devil's training and speed to block the attack, the force behind the holy weapon, cracking the balance breaker throughout its entire frame. I am disappointed, Kiba. That cold, dead, monotone voice chilled him to the bone. The fact that his aura was acting more like a raging fire, something that didn't even come close to matching the frozen bite in his voice, tripled with the fact that he couldn't see Issei's face, only made it that much more terrifying. I think I finally know what the whole point to all of this was. Why you do? Then. The blonde knight channeled his energy into his blade, all of the cracks instantly filled and glowing with newfound strength, the angle of the sword suddenly shifting, so that Ascalon would slide down and expose the dragon's neck. Obviously, death was not the aim of this maneuver, but a good shot at the throat should stagger Issei enough to gain distance. It was much safer to speak outside of his fists after all. Ascalon never moved. Boost. Suddenly, the knight's legs were swept out from under him by a single clawed leg. What the? In a single fluid motion, the crimson armor had spun in a circle and took out Kiba's legs, tripping him with and extended his right leg. The motion still going, the balance breaker burning with a cold anger, slammed his left fist deep into Kiba's gut, the momentum carrying additional force to the already boosted punch. Ah! Blood and spittle leapt from his mouth, splattering the carpet below. The full body weight of the knight pressing down on this boosted fist full of momentum. Never before had he felt so much pain from a single punch. A myriad of randomly colored specks floating in his vision, Kiba could barely make out a red energy glowing out of his stomach. Dragon shot. Thing. Following through, Issei released one of his very few long-range attacks at point-blank range, the already limp body shooting into the sky like a bullet, as the energy beam carried him higher and higher into the vast blue expanse above. Kiba. Stunned by how one-sided the engagement with Kiba and Issei, Akeno quickly flew up to retrieve the now falling body of the unconscious devil. Glaring at the hybrid for a moment, Issei turned his attention to Gasper who was shaking in his box, biting his teeth as they clattered in fear. We are going to die. Issei-senpai is going to kill us. You have anything to say, Gasper? Said Devil quickly shook his head back and forth, instantly responding to the question in favor of avoiding anything that could further enrage the already pissed dragon. Really? Because you were giving me quite the awful look just a few minutes ago. If you have something to say, you should say it. The others certainly did. And look what happened to them. Gasper screeched mentally, fearing that returning to his cardboard quarters would only provoke Issei further. As if cardboard was the best form of protection from a being capable of killing gods. After making that comment, Issei realized that it had suddenly gotten very quiet. Before, the entire peerage plus arena were here, now, all that remained was a very shattered room and the scared out of his wits vampire. If he had to guess. Since Rias wasn't here, Akeno took temporary command of the peerage and told them what to do. Zenobia should be getting Sona while Arena went to go get Rias and Asia, taking care of the students and the neighboring civilians as she went. That would leave Ravel, Kaneko, Gasper, and Kiba. Kaneko probably went to Sona too, and Ravel should have escaped with a magic circle. Gasper and Kiba were supposed to. Yeah. Seeing Kiba get absolutely obliterated, Akeno likely changed plans and contacted them with a magic circle and is probably carrying Kiba over to them to get healed. So, if he follows them, they will lead him to the two people who hurt him the most. Meanwhile, what is going on? A certain red dragon pondered in hurried frustration, his influence over the boosted gear literally non-existent as he once again tried to exert his will. Again, the gear failed to respond to him. Why? The boosted gear is a container that houses my power and my soul. Why isn't it answering my will? Was Issei's anger so great that he is subconsciously suppressing him? A human turned demon suppressing a dragon. Then again, Issei always did make the impossible possible. The dragon sighed, the long neck craning to look in another direction as its mind raced in reflection. Perhaps I should have objected towards the Gremory girl's plan. Several nights ago, the Gremory girl approached Issei while he slept. However, instead of calling to the boy, they called out to him, Drake. Curious, he answered their call, and they told him their plan to get Issei to realize his feelings for Rias. Of course, the dragon had long knew of the existence of these feelings, since before his wielder could manifest him. In addition, with Issei continuously going on and on over a woman's breast and his unfathomable lust for the opposite gender, the prideful dragon was nearing the edges of his sanity. He agreed to their plan, however, he was curious as to what the group of devils had planned if Issei remained ignorant. Flashback. If this plan of yours aids in curbing his sexual tendencies and alleviating some of his outlandish behavior, I will concur to this scheme. Excellent. The Gremory spoke, proud and relieved that she had Drake's approval. It helps knowing that you aren't against this or us getting together. She was garbed in only a thin nightgown, so she walked around the bed to join the boy and the rest of her peerage in bed. But let me ask you this, Gremory. The girl, who had shed her nightgown, freeing her bosom from the loose fabric, paused in her actions, holding the covers of the bed up with one arm. What is your plan should Issei either refuse you or remain ignorant? Two arcs of hair over her eyes fell as she finished getting into bed, her generous asset spilling over her crossed arms. Honestly, I don't know. Issei is dense, but I don't think he is that dense. This is as close as I can possibly get to him realizing his feelings for me without me blatantly telling him. So, why don't you just tell him? A familiar feeling rising within the legendary lizard. I fail to understand why such a roundabout method is required. By being honest with him, he is forced to acknowledge his feelings for you in a less confrontational manner, and you can tell him how you feel as well. Would that not be the better course of action? No, Drake, it isn't. A heavy exhale filled the air, a single strand of hair getting curled round and round. I shouldn't have to tell him in the first place. What kind of girl tells the man she likes that the strange feelings he has is love and that she loves him too? Several of my feminine hosts have done exactly what you just described. The glowing lights from the red gauntlet flashed brighter than they normally do. They knew what they wanted, struck, and were always successful with their romance because they were straightforward with their loved one. Another heavy sigh. I know what you are trying to tell me, Drake, and I get it. But in this time and age, men are supposed to make the first move when it comes to relationships. I have ignored that and gave him every single signal I can think of that I am interested in him. Sleeping in his bed, wearing raunchy clothes, letting him see me naked, I even offered him my virginity. I have done literally everything a girl can do. If Issei can't see the writing on the wall even after all of that. No, that won't happen. Issei just needs a little push, that is all. And if he needs more than a push, I will think of something. Flashback end. While he was still unsure of what the red-headed female had planned, the severity of the current situation did more than prove his doubts were well placed. A dark and sinister sensation slithered up the spine of the fearsome reptile. A great evil was stirring in the core of the sacred gear, something that was quite familiar. Drake dove deeper into Issei's God-given gift, rage motivating him to remove anything that was deemed harmful to his host. While he could not directly enter the core, he could still gaze and speak to those within. Focusing his will and bracing himself for whatever was the cause of the sinister aura, the seemingly endless space ripped before him. What business do you have with my previous hosts, God? He questioned the entity before him, gazing into the area that holds the grievances of the red dragons of old. Said individual was a handsome man with eyes that you would normally see on an average delinquent. This man had light blue hair that floats behind him with two small bangs similar to a blue lightning bolt, a blue jewel on his forehead and yellow earrings. The god apparent stood in the center of a circle, gazing at the previous hosts of the boosted gear, with the back facing the Welsh Dragon. Them? Nothing. The deity replied casually, feeling no fear, even with the full attention of one of the 13 long-eyes directed towards him. Although I do have some business with your current host. Issei Haidu is his name, correct? I was led to believe you were sealed in ice for eternity. The feeble attempt at provoking an angered response failed miserably. And I was. At least. Most of me was. He remarked, finally turning towards the mighty reptilian creature. Before I was struck by that cursed hammer Mjolnir, I placed a curse of my own inside of this boy and his bitch, separating two parts of my soul and implanting them inside their souls. And do you plan on getting revenge for what they did to you in your last battle? Revenge? No, something that petty is below me. What I want is for Ragnarok to be invoked. However, thanks to these ants, I can no longer do that. So, this is my, what do the humans call it? Backup plan. And what exactly do you mean by backup plan? Exactly what I have just said, lizard. Because after all. Lips cracked upwards as a sinister smile plastered itself in place. If I can't invoke the original Ragnarok, I'll just have to make a new one. XXX. Bekeno. The red-haired king ran towards her queen with bishop in tow, the fallen demon hybrid carrying the knight over her shoulder, sprinting out into the front of the school where her servant was landing. What is going on? What happened after I left? I don't know, Rias. Was the stressed reply, handing the boy in her arms over to Asia, standing side by side with her king. But I think we may have gone too far. Hold on. Is that Kiba? Hurriedly lowering him to the ground, the gentle bishop placed her hands over his chest, a green light spawning from the rings on her hands, bathing the body in a magnificent emerald brilliance. She scanned the body for any form of injury that may need immediate focus, instantly noticing the bloody mess splattered and caked all over his abdomen. Issei did this? Yes. Akeno looked away from her fellow club members, a hideous regret boiling over at the mere thought that she was involved in turning one of their own against them. A harsh slap of reality should have brought Issei around to realizing his feelings for Rias. But, did she? Did they take it too far? Akeno. Rias knelt down to look into her queen's eye, searching intently for a suitable explanation as to why everything went awry. What happened? I can answer that. Why acute? Boom. An explosion of sound blasted their ears with deafening force, the devils unfazed by the violent assault of noise. Normally, the devils would be worried about humans discovering the supernatural way beyond this point, however, Rias already contacted the student council, and they could still be seen carrying humans who had fainted beneath the power of a heavenly dragon to unknown destinations, and dispatching those who managed to maintain hold on their consciousness. That, and the pawn's mere presence erased any other concern in place of ensuring their own safety. I say. Surprised to see him in his scale mail, she stepped back in shock, while Asia remained unmoving as she continued to heal Kiba, seemingly scared stiff. Both of their faces reflected various forms of unease, confusion, fear, and worry as Issei slowly closed the distance between them, striding forward with each tick he made on the concrete. Hello, Rias. There it was. The single most important thing that the Gremory always wanted to hear. Her name. However, it was not at all like she imagined it. She believed it would leave his lips like sugar and honey when he finally realized his feelings for her and was ready to accept her. The cold gravel that fell from his lips was far from what she wanted. The change in facial expression must have given away what she was thinking because a voice left the helm of the dragon. Isn't this what you wanted? To be called by your first name? Was hearing your name leave my lips worth everything else I have done for you? WHWH, what are you talking about? Ria's mind proved to be incapable of thinking of what he was talking about in favor for getting as much distance between her and the enraged dragon as possible, backing away with each step he took. Really? You don't know? Then let me remind you, Rias. Emphasized like it was disgusting to even say further crushed the heart of the red-haired devil. First. Who was it that fought off the flame chicken and freed you from the arranged marriage you never wanted? Me. At the cost of my arm. I gave up a part of my body, a limb mind you, to save you that day in case you forgot. Second. Who fought off Vali when he tried to kill you to entice my anger? Third. Who was it that nearly died when we were fighting Fenrir, fighting Loki? Fourth. Who was it who went berserk when Asia was beamed to the dimensional gap? Lastly, but certainly not least, the way I was made into a devil. Letting me die at the hands of a being that you knew was invading your territory. You let me die at the hands of my first girlfriend, the very first female aside from my mother who acted like she gave a damn. You let me die to satisfy your agenda. You are just like Raynor, who actually murdered me to satisfy hers. As the angry lecture berating wrapped up, small orbs glowing the color of grass sprouted from the draconic armor and hovered a slight distance away from him. This spectacle forced their hearts even lower as an icy chill began to take over their spines, this sensation all too familiar to them. What made it worse was that they all knew there was nothing they could do to stop it. In fact, if they tried anything, it would probably make the situation worse than it already was. "You're right. Rias Onasama." The other two conscious members of her peerage turned their fearful gazes from the personification of rage itself to their leader, shock and disbelief dancing across their faces. Rias had tears streaming down her cheeks, but still managed to speak in a clear and even tone. "You're right. I had an idea of what the fallen angel would attempt, although I didn't know for certain. That is why you had that flyer given to you, so that I could step in should your life be put into danger. But I was too late. You were stabbed and bleeding profusely. It wasn't the way I wanted it to go, but I wasn't about to let you die before you even had a chance to live your life." "Live my life? Is this the life you wanted me to live?" Issei exasperated, signaling the vast amount of debris surrounding them, the humans that had yet to be collected for fear of enticing the Dragon of Domination's wrath, and the remains of what used to be the school building. "Fighting for your desires? Offering parts of my body to a dragon to protect you? Having my heart shattered by a girl who I genuinely thought cared? Having what was left stomped on for doing everything but saying a single word?" Speechless, Rias realized what Issei was saying and couldn't help but think that he wasn't wrong. A foul move was made to get him into her peerage. He fought for her, cared for her, protected her, almost died for her, and what did she do in return? Ignored everything he did and turned her back on him when she didn't get what she wanted. "I've said my piece. Now it is your turn, Asia." The blonde girl, staring into the cold eyes of the enraged dragon, was frozen where she knelt. The poor girl could not even think of moving. Not because Kiba was still in her lap, not because she was still not finished healing him, but because she feared that if she tried to move, or even avoid eye contact, she would die. "Who was the one who helped you when you needed it? You remember, don't you?" "Of course you do, how could you ever forget about the church? You know, the place where you literally died. And, correct me if I am wrong, but who was it that begged Rias on his hands and knees to bring you back to life? The person who is responsible for you even being alive. The person who went on an actual rampage when he thought you were dead. You." She whispered quietly, her body shaking as tears began to stream down her face, only to fall on the knight's head on her lap, truly realizing how much Issei had done for her and how she had treated him in return. "What was that, Asia? I couldn't hear you, would you say that again louder? Why you?" The tears turned into rivers and her cries became sobs, the memories of all that Issei did for her coming back to her, haunting her and the action she took today. "Really? Me? I thought it may have been Kiba because I am a horrible person who can't understand Ria's feelings. Do you realize how horrible all of you are for not realizing my feelings? Why? Yes." No sooner had she attempted to answer the question with the awful truth, Issei dashed forward, stopping mere inches from the terrified teen, her eyes slowly moving to gaze into the blackened emerald pools on his helm. "No. You don't." Akeno tried to speak up in Asia's defense, not even getting a word out before being instantly cut off as Issei plowed forth with his enraged beratements. "Akeno. You were with Rias when she made the decision to add me to the peerage. Don't you think you could have spoken up about your master letting someone die just so she could have another piece? Apparently not, since why would a queen dare question her king? Irina and Zenobia didn't even know about Rainer or the circumstances of my devilification, and they automatically decided to side with Rias without even hearing my side of the story. Thanks a lot, you two. Asper turned his back on me after I helped him get better at using his powers. Really appreciated that. Issei." Rias interrupted him before he could continue, a single arm raised to wipe the salty liquid from her eyes and cheeks. "I know you are mad at everyone, but leave them out of this. I was the one who told them to say those things." "Oh really? So, I guess you were also the one who told Kiba to pull his balance breaker on me? Or maybe you told Akeno to threaten me with her holy lightning." Her eyes grew wide and glanced towards her queen and her knight, still unconscious from the point-blank dragon shot. "Didn't think so. Now that everyone has had their verbal lashing. Drake. Out of everyone, I expected you to be by my side." There was no response. Silence was the only thing that came from the red device on his arm. "Oh? Not even going to acknowledge me? How about I dive into the sacred gear and talk to you directly? Would you like that?" "I sure would." "Don't." The green gem on his gauntlet shining to life for but a second, surprising the distraught boy. "Oh?" The enraged male glared down at the offended gem in his left arm. "And why exactly, Shu? Why don't you let him in, lizard? After all, this was bound to happen sooner or later." Every single thought of his vanished as this new voice entered his head. Gone with the desire to reap vengeance on the Gremory peerage, gone with the anger at the being he hosted, and gone with the emerald orbs that surrounded him. Unbeknownst of the internal conversation taking place within his cranium, Rias and the other two girls looked on in confusion and the faintest bit of relief. All of the pressure of the dragon's aura forced on them seemed to magically vanish from the atmosphere. Loki? How? TCH. The how and the why doesn't matter now, does it? All that matters now is that I am. Fear not, however, I will not kill you. Why, you might ask. Nothing overly difficult, I just need you to lay waste to this land in Ragnarok's stead. The only sound that could be heard, both inside and outside of Issei's head, was the cracking of concrete and brick in the distance as birds chirped overhead, oblivious to the conflict that churned within the dragon. The emotional suffering had not lessened nor vanished. But now a sudden sensation of clarity overcame him. Oh. I see. The frigid voice that had haunted the ears of everything within hearing range slowly, but surely, began to warm. So, you don't want to say hi, do? You just want the Red Dragon Emperor. Warning bells began to go off in everyone's head, all of them glancing at one another to see that they were thinking the same thing. Issei, that isn't it. We don't want Ga. The heavy, invisible force pushed down on them all, the dragon's aura growing to surround his figure in a blanket of murderous red and green, unknowingly cutting off the link he had with the sacred gear. You're telling me that if I never became the Red Dragon Emperor, then none of this would have happened to me? That, if I never had this gear on my arm, I would have had a normal life? Everything is because of this? Boost. 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 Blade. A sharp pointy protrusion suddenly sprouted from the area above the dragon's left palm, the crimson blade donning the dragon's aura instantly. The already red sword grew disturbingly eerie as the blood-red aura hinted with green snaked around it. With a low growl, the heartbroken boy wrapped his other hand around the base of the blade and pulled it away from the gauntlet, now holding the holy weapon in his other hand. No one dared to speak when the distraught child stepped towards their king, the knight still unconscious from the blast to the stomach. Issei senpai. The voiced interruption ceased his advance, separating the Crimson Princess and the Dragon of Domination were but measly inches. A quick glance determined the owner of the voice was Kuroka's younger sister, a blue-haired devil president besides her, alarmed and muttering something lost a distance into a magic circle rapidly. What are you doing? Please stop. Haidu, please, I must advise you to circa ah. Sona, stressing over the life of her best friend, a murderous dragon bordering on a juggernaut drive, and giving commands to her own peerage to escort the civilians to safety and setting up a perimeter around Ria's pawn, noticed a small ball of energy flying in her direction a fraction too late as it barreled into her pancreas, blood spilling out of her mouth in a pained cough. I'm sorry. Were you trying to tell me to calm down? Crimson-colored energy spilled out of the ball exactly like the move he had used on Kiba. No thanks. Bang. The president of the student council couldn't even let out a cry as the explosion took away her breath and sent her speeding into a nearby wall, what was left of the school corridor collapsing on top of her fallen figure. Sona. Akeno and Asia hollered. There may have been a third, more masculine voice mixed in, but Issei couldn't tell nor did he care. The dragon pointed a single talon at the Nekomata, Kaneko backing away slightly at the perceived threat. Stay right there, Kaneko. I don't want you getting any closer. Despite being told that, the Nekomata still tried to approach. Issei, plea. The earth exploded mere inches away from her foot, shudders sprinting through her figure as she fell flat on her ass. Don't move. The growl forced the self-preservation instinct within the yokai to kick in, compelling her to obey, teeth chattering and eyes round in fear. He actually shot at me. Issei, finished dealing with the outside nuisances, redirected his attention to the frightened but steadfast king, both of them staring at the other in the eye. You shouldn't have done that. She protested as vehemently as she could under the circumstances. This is between you and me. Neither of them deserved that. We both know that Sona was going to get involved sooner or later, nothing you wanted was going to change that. This isn't like the wedding with Rias. So long as her course of action did not endanger the Devil Society, her peerage, or her family, Sona was more than willing to do everything in her power to make sure that her friend was safe, even if it meant using herself as a shield for her. They both knew that and Issei took steps to prevent that, merciless as they may have been. For her part, Rias couldn't accept his methods. But it did spare Sona worse pain later, for which she was grateful. Kaneko, while her intentions are good, will suffer if she gets too close to me. Look at those two. The Dragon of Domination indicated Asia and Akeno. They can't even move due to the weight of my aura. The only reason you can is because I'm intentionally holding back on my power around you. And believe me when I say there is nothing more tempting right now than squash you with every ounce of it. Armed with this information, Rias tried to formulate a plan only to see seconds later. Issei had her. And he knew it. The Gremory heiress couldn't run, Issei would easily be able to catch up to her or turn towards her peerage and Sonas. She couldn't fight him either, maybe earn several seconds depending on how long Issei wanted this to drag out. There was nothing she could do. Except one thing. Slowly, defeatedly, she lowered her head in a bow and exposed her neck to him, careful with each word she spoke. "I'm sorry it had to end like this. If that means anything at this point." Rias apologized as sincerely as she could. "Please do what you want with me. Just leave my peerage out of it. Sona's too." The dragon's aura did not change, nor did its stance, nor its emotions. The only noticeably difference was that, when he spoke, his voice was faintly warmer. A sad and hidden smile straining the child's face. "You were the reason my sacred gear awoke. If you had let me die, I would have entered the reincarnation cycle, and the boosted gear would have found another host, sparing me from everything. But despite everything, I am sorry as well." Unable to move, Akeno and Asia were forced to remain prostrated and watch as Ascalon rose into the air, the blood-red aura gathering around the blade as the murderous force left the scale mail, the holy dragon slayer, now appearing to be pure black rather than red. "And I promise that I will not harm them. Issei, please. Issei-senpai. Issei." The other three devils, Akeno, Asia and Kaneko, cried out in anguish, begging for the life of someone they all knew and loved. The girls placed all of their hopes that, beneath all of the negative emotion and hatred, the boy they came to know was in there somewhere. He was not. He was dead. They killed him. And this is what happens when the only people he trusts betrays him not once, but twice. "There he is," the dragon called softly, the girl raising her head in question. "Will you die for me?" The cries of anguish fell into shock and dread as the Gremory smiled sadly in acceptance. "If that is what will make you happy." Her hair fell forward once more to expose her neck. "Rias?" Issei smiled beneath his helm. "Good." The pitch-black Ascalon swung down. "PPSSHH. Whop." The Gremory remained prostrate, wondering when her head would fall from her neck, now that it had been cut. Instants became moments and moments turned into seconds. After a few of those pregnant seconds passed, did she realize something was off? Something isn't right. That was the sole thought that passed through her mind as she slowly looked up to the man who was about to take her life until something on the ground caught her attention. It was an arm. A very bloody arm with a green gemmed gauntlet. Realization flashed across her face, looking up at the Red Dragon Emperor, only to confirm her fears. There he stood, Ascalon held in what was now his sole arm, a stump with a liquid of life running profusely down his side as he slumped forward in what was possibly pain. "Issei?" Kaneko shouted in shock and horror, ignoring the fear telling her to remain still as she entered a dead sprint towards the injured dragon. The others were rendered incapable of speaking as they watched the scene before them. Issei had just cut off his own arm. The same arm he gave the dragon back during Razor's wedding. But wouldn't that? The faint glow began to surround the severed limb, the emerald light growing brighter and brighter until it became blinding. And the light continued to grow. Just before the inevitable, Rias could hear a voice on the other side of the over-radiant appendage. "You don't get to die. Rias. You are going to live with the guilt of being the sole reason the Red Dragon Emperor ceases to exist." Boom. An explosion even bigger than the one Issei released shook the entire school building, the former Red Dragon Emperor rocketing through the sky since he was the closest to the blast. No one noticed when the Nekomata jumped on him before the blast occurred, the few members of the occult club present shielding themselves from yet another blast of explosive power. They struggled to remain in place, the blast causing a vicious hail of wind that threatened to slam them through the few remaining walls still standing. As they attempted to resist the sudden gale, a voice could be heard from where Issei's appendage fell. "Welsh Dragon. Seal is broken." "Ugh." A certain brown-haired individual groaned in pain. His memory was fuzzy, his body was in tremendous pain, he couldn't feel anything from his left arm. "Oh. Issei Sanapi. Issei Senpai." A voice said his name. "Oh. Kaneko." It hurt to speak. It hurt to feel. Even opening his eye took more effort than it should. Sandpaper lined his throat as he spoke, one of his eyes numb and unseeing, and he could literally feel his heartbeat reverberate from the tips of his fingers to the ends of his toes. Despite the mass numbness, he could still feel a faint pressure on his waist, Kaneko's face, hair, and hands slathered in mud and blood. Oh. Explosion. Why was she in her underwear? "Issei senpai. Please don't say anything. I'm trying to heal you." "Heal? I don't need healing. I've been in worse pain than this." Curious as to the shape he was in, he let his face fall to the left to take in the state of his arm. Or lack thereof. Where his appendage would normally be, there was a bunch of white wrapping that was drenched in some kind of red liquid. There was a sense of familiarity when he looked at the strips covering his stump, they looked almost exactly like his school uniform. TCH. This isn't working. The Nekomata's voice reached the former dragon's ears. At least those were working fine. Ish. What are you? Cough cough. With each spasm he went through, the pain only increased several times over. Please don't speak. She snapped at her patient, maddened that he seemed insistent on doing something. Issei couldn't help but notice the impatience in her voice. The desperation. He decided to heed her wishes and remain quiet. It felt a lot better not to speak anyway. He watched as the girl's cat ears twitched occasionally and tail shake restlessly as he simply lay against the uncomfortable ground. Slowly, ever so slowly, he could feel some feeling return to his body, his crotch more so than the other areas. No. Even bedroom arts aren't enough. Kaneko grew increasingly worried and frustrated, forcing her hips to move faster. Bedroom arts. Isn't that some kind of healing technique used during sex? Ah. So that is what she is doing. Too bad it hurt so much I can't even enjoy it. PSSHF, PSSHF. A bush began to ruffle. Issei and Kaneko quickly glanced over to said bush, the former getting a large headache from just doing so. See Vali. I told you I felt Shirin's energy around he. Red Dragon Emperor. Issei felt another presence position itself next to him. Hiroka Wani-sama. Kaneko was focusing so much on healing her senpai that she didn't notice her sister's presence until she was right next to her. Hi do. Issei recognized that last voice, the clothing and hairstyle, only confirmed it once the owner of the voice stepped into his view. Vali. He. Cough. Vali Lucifer was wearing a dark green shirt under a black jacket with burgundy pants, his normal attire. He was looking down at the two Nekomata and the boy, wondering what his rival could have done to put himself into such a state. From Vali's point of view, Issei's body was in such a shape that even he was surprised Haidu was still alive. The left side of his body looked like the equivalent of what humans call spaghetti. His left arm was non-existent, the white and yellow of his rib bones peeking out of what was left of his flesh, and the left leg was just barely attached. His right side looked just about the same as before save for a few evident broken bones. Shirin, I need you to focus on the bedroom arts, I'll take care of the healing. Vali, I'm going to need your help. Appalled at the shape of the man below her sister, Kuroka began to cast all of the repair and healing spells she knew. It was no wonder her sister was performing the bedroom arts, the Red Dragon Emperor would have died already if it wasn't for Shirin. Vali, surprised to see that the elder Nekomata was ordering him around, did as he was told and performed his share of healing and repair spells. It wasn't like he didn't want to do so, he had questions for his rival that needed answers. Then again, he could just ask the girl who was slamming herself on his rival's nether region. At least this isn't boring. Vali thought, a small smile forming on his face, as he redirected his focus towards the former wielder of the boosted gear. What happened Haidu? The Lucifer asked, ensuring his rival's flesh was knitting together properly. Well cough cough his body was in such bad shape that even his throat was telling him to shut the fuck up. Hiroka's eyes wandered away from Issei's naked ribsage as the harsh tones of a man trying to cough up his own lungs forced its way into her ears. Taking a glance to ensure that his lungs were indeed still in place, a silky smooth arm draped in black cloth traveled up his body as light sprinkled from her fingertips. Thanks Kuroka. As I was trying to say. The others were being selfish and pissed me off. When I tried talking at Dreg. Loki answered. Loki? The host of Albion couldn't stop himself from voicing his doubt. Didn't Odin seal him away? I thought so. Anyway, he wanted me to become a new Ragnarok. Or whatever. With the power of the Red Dragon. I was confused, angry, and scared. I focused my will, cut my arm off with Ascalon, and separated the gear from my body. Red Dragon this, Red Dragon that, never Issei. I guess I just lost it. I see. A soft exhale filled the air, Vali turning his head towards the heavens above. Issei followed his view the best he could, but it was difficult to see the stars when there was a big busty beauty on one side of him and the second cutest girl, covered in a hazy blue aura, slamming herself down on his unfeeling meat. Countless twinkles decorated the sky, shining light down on the emerald foliage around them alongside the full moon. The combination of stars and moon made it so that there was no absence of light. This, the gentle breeze that played with Vali's clothes and hair, and the way he stood with his head craned up and back facing Issei left with a truly majestic appearance. It seems fate truly works in mysterious ways. Kaneko and Issei noticed the almost wistful tone in his voice, Kuroka easily picking up on the change of atmosphere despite the severity of her patient's condition. Vali is no longer the White Dragon Emperor. Issei here must have destroyed the seal god placed on the dragons by forcibly removing the boosted gear. The seal had to have been linking the two of them since Albion left Vali only hours ago. So, when one seal broke, the other broke as well. This was certainly news to them. The key to breaking the seal on the two heavenly dragons was to remove one of the gears from their bodies. No, it couldn't be that simple, there had to be more. God wouldn't let such a strong seal have such a weakness. Would he? So why are you not injured? Issei asked. For one, Albion left without resisting because that would only hurt the both of us in the long run. The real reason is because I was stronger than you without the dragon and I was able to prevent most of the damage. But really, it is better now that Albion is gone. He was getting a little over-insistent that we continue the battle between white and red. He always seemed satisfied with constantly fighting on the front lines of the Cows Brigade. Fighting those Northern Earth gods was absolutely thrilling, but the way he acted gave me the impression that he was wanting. Is the battle between Drake and Albion that important to them? Kaneko's voice was starting to trail off, the pleasure must be making her close. Shirin, you can't stop moving. Here, I'll take some of the pleasure for myself, but you have to keep moving. You're the one keeping the boy alive, if you stop, he dies. Kuroka placed a hand on Kaneko's shoulder and a green aura-like substance appeared on the younger Nekomata that was focused on the area between her legs. That substance started moving up her body and towards the older Nekomata's hand, the older cat creature's eyes rolling back a little before adjusting to the foreign sensation. Thanks. Wani-sama. Her breathing became more regular and her pacing normalized. Kuroka, feeling a portion of what Kaneko was, couldn't help but moan and lick her lips despite the situation. Wani-sama, please focus on healing Issei-senpai. Kuroka regained herself at her sister's words and focused her more of her magic onto Issei's left side. Vali answered the previously unanswered question. Those two have been battling since before the Great War amongst the three powers. I don't know what provided the incentive, but they are serious when it comes to their rivalry. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to do battle until the end of time. Having never stopped his magic while looking towards the stars, working on Issei with his back turned, Vali focused on the task at hand once more. Several long minutes later, Vali and Kuroka slowly grew frustrated and worried as the situation continued to worsen rather than improve. Neither of their magics were working nearly as effective as they should. One of them alone could heal a number of humans on the brink of death to near perfect health effortlessly, yet the both of them combined could not seem to heal a weak and dying devil. His external and internal wounds were healing nicely, but he didn't seem to be getting better. Could this be some kind of side effect on his body from the removal of the Welsh Dragon? What is going on? A high-pitched sound bounced off of the trees, feminine and childlike in nature. All heads turned, taking in the sight of a small girl slowly strolling towards them. Long black hair tossed and turned in the breeze as twin amethyst orbs innocently pierced through the surrounding vegetation. Clothed in a classic purple and black gothic Lolita outfit with an open chest, matching X-shaped bandages covering the nipples of her visible breasts, it was an appearance that could be considered erotic to those with certain fetishes. Ophis. Vali acknowledged. The name bounced around in the heads of the two devils before finally realizing that this child was the dragon god of infinity. Can't say. I expected to see the infinite dragon god again. Issei's voice was barely even a whisper that almost failed at leaving his lips. The others noticed how faint his voice was and redoubled their efforts of attempting to heal whatever was ailing the weakened devil. His bones were no longer broken and skin grew over the stump that had previously been an arm, the bleeding had stopped and he looked perfectly fine. But his life force was still diminishing rapidly despite the bedroom arts Kaneko was performing. I ask again. Ophis said, rather annoyed that no one was paying attention to her. What is happening? Kaneko spoke first, gazing intently into God's eyes with such emotion that anyone else would have looked away in embarrassment. Please. Help Issei-senpai. Please. The despairing devil could not say much more. Tears fell freely from her amber eyes, almost believing that this is where the man she loved was going to die. Help. The little deity expressed her confusion, tilting her head in a cute manner. Help, with what? Vali elaborated. Issei Haidu ripped the boosted gear from his body. I'm guessing that when he tore Drake out, a portion of his soul went with it. It must be in a critical state if he is in this bad of a shape after all of the magic we cast on him. I'm afraid. There is nothing more we can do. The Lucifer delivered his analysis of the situation with a hint of sadness. The world was about to lose one of the few he deemed worthy of his rivalry. And no. I can't be. Kaneko could not help it anymore. The small drips of water turned into a steady stream, outright sobbing, all the while attempting desperately to put more magic into the bedroom arts. I'm sorry Shirin. But I have to agree with Vali. Kuroka told her sister, trying to give her the news as gently as she could. This only made her sob even more. No. I'm not giving up. I can't just let him die. Not again. not from another betrayal. Kuroka was the one who made him the way he was, now Rias is the reason for the way he is. That is just cruel. Dying like this twice. I can't accept that. Ophis finished approaching the party and looked down on the dying devil. Drake, you are going to die. It looks like it. Issei replied as best he could, his body growing colder and colder by the minute. But my name isn't Drake. My name is Issei. Issei. Ophis tested how the pronunciation felt, experimenting with each syllable. Do you want to die? Haha. Not really. Why? Don't you wish to end the pain? The girl bent her neck to the side again, similar to that of a confused dog. I guess. But more than that. I want to live. Why? Kuroka, Kaneko, and Vali observed the interaction. One of them watched on with sad disappointment, another one with worry and awkwardness, the last one still crying her heart out for the man who had earned her trust and love. Unable to take it much longer, Kuroka placed a single hand on her sister's shoulder. I want to enjoy what this world has to offer. Issei whispered, his voice barely able to do more than that. There are lots of things I want to do still. Like what? The Ouroboros dragon could not comprehend what would motivate the former wielder of Drake to continue living. What could possibly be worth the pain it takes to maintain his existence when he could pass on to something more painless? Issei could feel his sensation fading. But something was inspiring him to continue talking to the deity, as if talking to her would keep him alive even a little bit longer. I want to get stronger. Fight strong people. Vali and Issei locked eyes. Enjoy peace and quiet. Kuroka turned herself away from her sister to gaze at the dying boy. Ophis continued to watch the boy who was making her feel things. But most of all, I just want to be acknowledged. Loved. Kaneko did everything she could to not go back over to Issei and wrap her arms around him in an attempt to comfort him. Issei-senpai. Kaneko's tears were beginning to dry up, not believing what she was hearing. She had always thought of him as some super perv. But as time went on, she saw that he actually did care for the club. Cared about her. These were his real feelings. This was his motivation for being so perverted. But this didn't answer why he chose to be a pervert to accomplish his goals. What about you, Ophis? What do you want? Issei asked the infinite mass of energy. What do you desire? I want to return to silence. She replied, finding herself drawn into his gaze and unable to look away. Something was off about him, but she couldn't seem to figure out what. A sensation was rising to the surface from the depths of her body. Was this emotion? This desire, this drive, this motivation to keep him talking? I wish to go back to the dimensional gap. But Great Red is there. Noisy. Can't enjoy silence. I want him out. So, Ophis' goal is to take back her home. Issei thought. Has she ever thought of making a new home? A new place to enjoy silence? Just as he was about to close his eyes forever. I'm guessing that when he tore Drake from his body, a portion of his soul went with it. I want to return to silence. A new place to enjoy silence. Ophis. The mass of energy blinked at the sound of her name leaving the boy's lips, his arm stretching out towards her. Will you enjoy silence inside of me? No one understood what the devil meant by that. Enjoy silence inside of him. What did that mean? It didn't seem like a perverted request, as if he was in a position to consider such a thing, but this was Issei Haidu after all, but an honest question. I do not understand. The dragon replied with yet another tilted head, however, that feeling in the pit of her stomach was growing stronger, she could even feel her heart beating inside her chest. Make my soul your new home. Issei asked, a newfound hope giving birth inside his mind. You should be able to enjoy silence inside my soul. No one knew what that meant. Issei wasn't making any sense. Was he becoming delusional in the face of death? However, there was one person who seemed to understand. You wish to host me? The brown-haired boy smiled, not knowing how to put his meaning into words. Thankfully, the mass of infinite energy was smarter than she looked. If you can make my soul whole again, there should be silence. The light in the boy's eyes faded, his body went limp, and his head fell once again to the side. The devil known as Issei Haidu, former pawn of the Grimoire and former Red Dragon Emperor, was dead. No. 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 The younger Nekomata's crying was renewed with great vigor, sprinting past her sister's outstretched arm, her hands grabbing the collar of the dead man's shirt and pulling his upper body to her, wrapping her arms around the torso of the devil's corpse, crying relentlessly into the cloth. Kuroka had to turn away, unable to keep her own emotions down, as tears began to travel down her own cheeks. She wasn't as hurt by the fact that Issei died, it was how much it tore her apart, listening to the cries of her sister as she begged the corpse to come back to her. Never had she thought such sounds could ever leave her sister's throat, and it pulled at her soul. Vali turned away as well, if only to not look at the unrefined scene behind him. He had no wish to see the massive sorrow and sadness fight against reality, let alone to see the body of his rival pass on without honor. Had he died in battle, Vali could appreciate such a death. To die rejected by the people he loved. Even someone such as him would not wish such a thing on a person. HMM. A voice chuckled, unable to take the growing feelings anymore. HMM. The other three present turned to face the being who dared to laugh at the death of someone who did not deserve it. Only to find the girl in gothic clothes to be covering her stomach as she laughed. Ophis is laughing. Vali thought with his mouth agape like a fish. He didn't even know it was possible for the infinite dragon god to laugh. The two Nekomatas just stared at the little girl as her laughing died down. Issei. You are interesting. So interesting. You offer me your soul so that I may obtain silence. Very well. I approve. This was very unlike the Ouroboros dragon. Kaneko's whole body shook as her delicate hands clenched with a force that could rip a car into scrap metal, killing intent bathing her as she stood. No one dares laugh in the face of the death of her loved one, dragon god or not. But Kuroka and Vali knew. This wasn't like Ophis. Just as Kaneko was about to pull her fist back, a black and purple mist-like substance appeared from the black-haired girl's body, purplish lightning flashing within the black and purple fog as it swallowed the surrounding area. Before Ophis was swallowed by the miasma, everyone caught a glimpse of her face. She was smiling. The infinite dragon god was smiling. Not some cocky smirk or anything like that, but a smile born out of eagerness and happiness. The black fog grew larger and wider, becoming even larger than the god-slaying dog Fenrir. Even larger than Tannen. The sky above was beginning to change as well. What was once a clear sky filled with stars was now blanketed by clouds, a fierce wind blowing through their hair. Breg. No, you said your name was Issei. The voice of the dragon god emerged from the unknown substance. The voice was a lot deeper than the voice of the little girl they knew as Ophis, however. It sounded nothing like the human figure she had donned before, old and ancient, but still feminine and powerful. The force of the speech alone made the knees of Vali, Kaneko and Kuroka buckle, making the three of them bend down once more, bowing before the supreme force of one of the strongest beings in creation. I deem you the only being in creation worthy of this gift. I deem you worthy of the name Ouroboros. Now, let yourself obtain strength. Let me obtain silence. Let us become one. The mass of black clouds that hovered above all of them suddenly fell, a tendril of darkness rocketing down from the sky towards the body of the deceased devil. Look out. Kuroka noticed the direction the tendril was taking and jumped towards her sister and jumped backwards as hard as she possibly could. Kaneko, who had been running towards her beloved to shield him from the unknown force above them, was pulled by her sister just in time to avoid being hit by the blast. When the cloud-like substance and Issei's body made contact, a large boom sounded off, the force of the shockwave pushing the three devils several meters away. Issei. Kaneko yelled over the rushing wind. Confusion and worry were the least of what she was feeling watching this scene. Kuroka didn't know what was happening either, only that something in that massive cloud was giving power to the former Red Dragon Emperor. Is Ophis giving the boy power? Kuroka yelled at Vali, trying to be heard. Why is she giving power to a corpse? She isn't just giving him power. Vali hollered back, unable to take his eyes off of the scene. And Issei didn't die after all. It makes sense now. His soul was broken to the point where his body basically shut down. If his soul gets repaired, then his body will naturally start working again. What Ophis is doing is deconstructing his soul and rebuilding it using her own. She is literally melding their souls together. So that means. Kaneko started, hoping against all odds that what she was thinking was true. Ophis and Issei are becoming one. One in mind, one in body, one in soul. Kuroka finished, awestruck at the scene before. Suddenly, all of the black and purple miasma vanished, all of it entering the devil's body. Vali, Kuroka, and Kaneko all stood there, unsure of what to do. A twitch. The hand pushed itself against the ground, lifting the upper body off of the ground. Knees bent and Issei was standing again. The boy looked down at his body, his arm, his other arm, his legs. His other arm. The boy looked down at the rest of his body. He felt no pain, no coldness, his body looked essentially the same as before. There was an unnatural warmth inside of his chest and new left arm though. The infusion is done. Ophis' voice could be heard by all of the devils. It was the voice that Kuroka and Vali grew accustomed to, but Ophis herself was nowhere to be seen. But you must hurry. Your body cannot handle my power. I have already made preparations to seal most of my power, but you need to offer me a chant that will be used to release the seal until your body can adjust to my presence. You only have one chance before my power burns you alive. So that is what this warmth is. Issei thought as he gripped his chest where the heat originated, growing hotter and hotter with each passing second. The boy remained silent, taking in the view of his left arm, thinking. Then he smiled. A chant? Okay, I think I have something in mind. Issei turned towards the Lucifer and the two Nekomata. With a victorious grin, he thrust up his newly regenerated arm and spoke. I, who shall awaken? I am the Ouroboros dragon who soars above the principles of domination. I am the infinite that seeks out the dream. I shall become the black dragon of infinity. And drown you in the depths of infinite silence. Ouroboros dragon. Power is sealed. The plans of a new future. The devils before Issei could not help but stare with mouths agape at the arm he held over his head. All three of them were beyond surprised as they should be. On his newly regenerated arm was a black and purple version of the boosted gear. An infinity gear. Vali was absolutely stunned, as were the girls. To request one of the most powerful beings, the dragon god of infinity, the true black dragon god emperor, the Ouroboros dragon, to reside within their soul. Albion, if there's anything I learned from this host, it's that if a fool is foolish enough, he'll achieve the impossible. The impossible. Truly, what Drake said back then could not have been more accurate. Issei could feel his body growing cooler by the second, the overwhelming power gradually receding from where it came. Confident that his life was no longer in danger, he lowered his black and purple gauntlet to gaze at it closer. It really looked a lot like the boosted gear, the only differences were that the jewel was purple and the gauntlet was black with purple markings comparable to that of the boosted gear. Hell, even the markings were the same as the boosted gear. It had a very nostalgic feeling to it, like it was a perfect fit. There wasn't any inclination that his gear was out like he did with Drake. With the Welsh Dragon, he could always tell when the boosted gear was active or not. With this, Vali said something about an infinity gear. Not only did the name sound catchy, but with the only outward difference between the two gears being coloration, the name made sense. He liked it. This infinity gear felt so natural, like it was a perfect fit, conformed to him, whereas he had to conform to the boosted gear. That is only natural. The jewel glowed and the voice of the infinite dragon god could be heard inside of the boy's head. When you were bonded to Drake, his power could only be called on when you desired it. My strength, however, is always there. Infinity cannot be contained unless I allow it. That makes sense. The reincarnated dragon thought. So, how is it? Do you finally have the silence you have been looking for? This was one of the few worries he had left. If Ophis was dissatisfied, he couldn't exactly stop her from leaving and putting him back in that death-like state. Yes. At long last, I have attained silence. Thank you, Issei Haidu, for helping me accomplish what I desired most. Hey, I should be the one thanking you. I only escaped certain death because of you. At this point, that was the boy's greatest relief. There have been too many attempts on his life ever since he joined the world of the supernatural. Rainer's light spear, Riser's one attempt at killing Rias' peerage, Loki, and everything in between. In two of those numerous attempts, he actually did die. What just recently transpired could be considered a third attempt on his life, despite it being his own. How many more times would death try to take him? Issei shook his head at such unpleasant thoughts. Well, I should head over to the others. Just as he was about to do just that, Ophis spoke once again. Issei, listen to me carefully. Ophis told him, making the boy pause in his actions. Because you are now a full dragon, you will always be releasing more draconic energy in comparison to what you were before. Forces both positive and negative are going to be drawn towards you at an even greater scale. This was most certainly a cause for concern. Issei could feel how weak had become. He was much stronger with Drake. Must be a side effect from the fusion, he reasoned. Hums with being a full dragon, I guess. Was his acceptive response. Makes sense that the attractive forces would be stronger now that I am a full dragon. He reasoned, seeing nothing that should upset him regarding this fact. Another thing I should mention is that you are not ready to wield the infinite mass of energy that I represent. Only I, who is infinite, can control my infinite strength. I guess that makes sense. But if we became one, then shouldn't I be able to access your power? With time, yes. However, as of right now, you are no more powerful than you were with Drake's balance breaker. There is no way a freshly turned dragon could possibly wield the entirety of my strength. For now, you will have to make do with the abilities you acquired alongside Drake. My abilities? Hold on, you don't mean. That is right, you can still use all of the abilities that you had when bonded with the Welsh Dragon. Boost, transfer, divide, Baylor view, all of them. Wow. That is great. Thanks Ophis. But I can use divide in Baylor view. When have I had those abilities? From what I saw of your memories, I couldn't say. I would guess that you somehow used those abilities when you were in Juggernaut Drive and your soul remembered how you used them. I allowed them to stay because they looked interesting and will most certainly aid you in the future. Oh? Wow. I don't even know what to say at this point. All this new information, along with this day in general, was really starting to make his head hurt. So, regarding your own power. How long would it take for me to have access it? Judging by how well your body is adapting to my influence, at best a century. A century? Yes, a century. Because we became one, I am your body just as you are mine. My body can handle my energy no matter what form I enter. You, however, cannot. The fusion of a being such as myself and a being such as yourself resulted in our body becoming unstable. Currently, the seal is holding the vast majority of our power. It will take at least a century for our body to adapt to the sudden change and let us access more of what is now our strength. Issei nodded in understanding, removing his gaze from his left arm and looking over at the three devils who continued to stare at him in shock and awe, unable to believe what they bore witness to. If I train my body, would that make any difference? Very little. Like I said, the problem is not your physical condition, but the presence of an unknown entity in our body. You. The strongest dragon replied. Mere training will not accomplish anything regarding accessing my power faster. Well, that is unfortunate. Well, can't be helped. I should also let you know that your soul was not a sufficient payment for becoming my host. This information caused the reincarnated dragon to raise his eyebrow as he started to walk over to his friends who had helped him survive long enough for Ophis to repair his soul. Could you explain? If I were to merely take your soul, your body would be unable to adjust to the sudden amount of power you took on, and you would literally combust from my strength before I could do anything to stop it. I had to take your entire body as well, so that I can slowly mold it into a body capable of accessing our power. Still kind of confused here. You are a newly created planet, and I am the rest of the universe. If I gave you everything I had, you would explode. You need time to grow into a beautiful orb of life like Earth in order to handle the dangers that I come with. Issei. A sudden ball of white slammed itself against the former devil's chest just as the black dragon finished its explanation. Looking down, the boy saw that it was the younger of the two present Nekashu. You're alive. You're alive. The girl was squeezing him so hard that his human self would most likely die from a crushed spinal cord. The dragon in human form raised a hand and ran it through her hair, while another played with her cat ears as Kaneko cried into his chest in joy and relief. Sorry I worried you so much. I promise it won't ever happen again. The calm, comforting tone did much to ease the display of emotions that wrapped itself around his torso. Still refusing to let go, Issei smiled down at her and ran his hand through her hair, scratching the back of her skull in a manner that left her snuggling into him with dried tears, caking her happy face. Hiroka, Vali. Issei raised his head and spoke to the other two. Thank you for helping me until Ophis arrived. If it wasn't for you two, I would have truly died. Anything to make Shirin happy, Naya. The elder Nekomata replied while waving the gratitude off in a carefree manner, adding a Naya at the end, now that the situation has relaxed. I only did it because you deserve a glorified death on the battlefield. Vali explained his reasoning for his assistance no further, crossing his arms relaxingly. Even so, I cannot thank you enough. The two of them gave him a small smile before Kuroka asked a question. So, what are you going to do now, Naya? Everyone froze when those words left the girl's mouth. What was he going to do? They were the Vali group, and the Vali group's objective were to protect Ophis. However, Issei became one with Ophis. Oh. Shouldn't he be the one they need to protect? The answer seemed to be made for them. I think I am going to hang out with you guys for a while. Issei told the small group, still petting Kaneko on the head, loving every bit of soft hair. I mean, I am technically a stray devil now. If not, then the entire underworld will think I am dead before long. I also don't have anywhere else to go since Rias did all but steal my house. True. Kaneko gazed up at him with a seemingly apologetic expression. A smile was all it took to satisfy her worries this time. Not only that, Vali added. But you are much weaker than you were when you were the Welsh Dragon. Is that a side effect from merging with Ophis? Yeah, something about being a new planet unable to handle the dangers of the universe. Issei was still wrapping his head around the dumbed-down explanation that was given to him. Eventually, he relented, thinking that he was simply still unable to comprehend the concept of infinity just yet. That makes sense. Since you are hosting Ophis and not the other way around, if she gave you everything at once, you would most likely be erased from existence, Naya. Kuroka sat beside him, happy to be next to her smiling sister. How long before you can harness her original power? Any guess? Ophis said the fusion went better than expected. It may or may not be due to my affinity for dragons, but I should be able to handle it in about a century. Only a century? The half-devil couldn't help but raise an eyebrow with a lopsided smirk. Would you be training at all? To accelerate your growth? I am still probably going to train, but that won't do anything in regards to getting more of her power anytime soon. So the time is set in stone. Rather unfortunate to have to wait a century to see anything interesting. You said you were still going to train. Yeah. I managed to retain all of my skills from when I was the Red Dragon, so I was going to play around with them a little and actually familiarize myself with them. Boost is pretty much the only thing I really used back then, relying on power to fight power. I only used bow. Color flushed the cheeks of the resurrected man, a palm running through his hair as he tried to not remember the name of his technique. I can't believe I called it that. Vali, Kuroka, and Kaneko all exchanged a glance at his words. The older Nekomata was the one curious enough to inquire, however. What are you talking about, Naya? The flush on his face lit him up like a Christmas tree, Issei constantly changing where he put his weight and not once dared to meet their eyes. Lingual. It was muttered under his breath so the now Ouroboros dragon believed no one would hear it. What he failed to realize, however, was that 2 of the present 3 had enhanced hearing, while the only male was, unknown to all, a very good lip reader. The Blingual. The older Yakai could not resist the urge to raise an eyebrow and smirk at the odd name. The blush only grew more vivid hearing it come from the girl's lips. If I am correct. Vali joined in the confusion. Lingual refers to language, correct? Does that mean you can understand the language of breasts? I must say, I am unsure if I am understanding this technique correctly. Oh. Really? The smirking Kuroka, seeing an opportunity, leaned forward with narrowed eyes, thrusting her chest nice and snug against the dragon's face. Can you tell me what these breasts are saying? Hey. Can you? For his part, Issei was surprisingly calm despite the fact that the 2 mounds of glorious flesh were cutting off his oxygen. Not only did he fail to indulge in the blissful sensation of the Nekomata's bountiful bosom, he also gently removed her overly tempting figure, with not so much as a trace of the previous coloring upon his face. Kuroka was absolutely flabbergasted. The old Haidu Issei was a perverse boy who frequently indulged in a woman's natural gifts. Not only was he failing so to anything to her or react in a bashful manner at her forwardness, but he also pushed her away, a major coup to her feminine pride. Kaneko was equally shocked as well, having the 2 mounds of flesh unknowingly placed upon her head removed by the man in her embrace. Vali raised a singular eyebrow but said nothing, his rival exhibiting behavior that was quite different from what he expected, and it intrigued him greatly. Kuroka. With a hand still on her shoulder, a firm squeeze came before Issei continued. Well, I won't deny that was absolutely amazing. Don't you think that kind of behavior should be saved until it is just the 2 of us? A quick wink and a confident smirk, combined with his newly built figure exposed for the world to see in the very much tattered and bloodied shirt, were too much to the seductive Nekashu. Kuroka was the one wearing the blush this time, with Kaneko quickly following suit, although the red on her face was not for the same reasons. What do you mean, the 2 of you? The rook gripped the remnants of the collar and shook it with such force, Vali could feel the breeze it made from several feet away. If you think for a second that I am just going to let you do anything with that cow. Shirin. The moment her real name left those smooth lips, her limbs ceased treating him like a rag doll. That single word left her completely still, her limbs feeling heavy as she gazed into those chocolate orbs of his with her amber ones, watched a single arm glided across her skin. Tiny hairs rose and a minute tingling filled her spine when fingers dove into her shoulder-length hair. His face drew closer. You were there for me when the others weren't, stayed by my side when it mattered most. It means the world to me that you did that, and I can't apologize enough for shooting at you during my episode. If it wasn't for you, I would be dead by the hands of a juggernaut or the explosion. You're the reason I am alive right now, not Kuroka. His face was too close, hell, she could feel his breath. An arm around her waist and other still in her hair, fingers combing through it with his breath tickling her sensitive ears, Shirin was left panting into his chest. I say. I wonder what I should do to thank you. Shy. N. But those quiet utterances caressing her delicate ears with a voice of honey, the Ouroboros applied an affectionate nibble and a firm but tender tug of her hair. This. Overstimulated from her ears and scalp, exhausted from the emotionally stressing day, the younger of the 2 yokai became an embarrassed and happy mass of putty, dirty thoughts flooding her mind like a tidal wave. The blushing Nekomata, overhearing everything, was torn. One part of her wanted to protect Shirin's innocence, while another wanted to jump him here and now, audience be damned. Those thoughts instantly melted when the boy set her sister down in a patch of fresh, clean grass, stood, and began to stride towards her. She sat unmoving as the boy entered her personal space, positioning himself next to her ear just like he had with Shirin. Behave yourself and perhaps I will treat you to a reward later. Moments later, she was lying beside her sister in a very similar state. Issei Haidu. The boy in question turned to see the half-devil approaching him with a smile tugging at his face and hands in pockets. What happened to you? Depends on what you are asking. He answered. Today has been rather eventful, after all. So, I've heard. Let me rephrase that, you are not acting at all like the person who I fought with a while back. You seem to have more self-control, more awareness, and more confidence than before. The way you treated those two is also confusing. I've done my homework on you since our battle. You were killed once by a fallen angel when you were still human. That same fallen angel killed someone you considered close to you as well. And earlier, you said the others were being selfish. When you say others, I assume you were talking about the Grimoire and her peerage. So, something happened, something unpleasant, and it eventually led to you being here, with no boosted gear. Yet, you are still treating Kuroka and her sister fairly well, dare I say affectionately. Considering everything that has happened thus far, shouldn't you feel some sort of animosity towards the opposite gender? After all of the female you trusted have hurt you in one way or another. I would not be surprised if you felt animosity in general actually, with all of the near-death experiences and battles you experienced. Vali was right. Raynor killing him, being brought back to life by Rias as a dirty move to acquire another piece, Raynor killing Asia, going through hellish training, the Holy Sword incident, sacrificing his body for strength, fighting Riser and his peerage Fenrir, Loki, the betrayals he faced, the list could go on. If Issei just flat out chose to turn his back on the factions and on girls in general, no one would be able to fault him on it, not easily at least. But despite everything, Issei continued to smile and treat women the same as he always had. Better than he had, if past experience was anything to go by. To be perfectly honest, Vali, I don't know. The boy turned to see the two girls on the ground, watching them talk and listening intently. One wrong move and your expectations could very well have become reality. But I think I know the reason why I just can't bring myself to discriminate against a female gender and seclude myself somewhere. An enjoyable silence filled the air. A starry night sky bore down on them, the chirping of birds and the songs of crickets filled the air as they bathed in the light of a full moon. The atmosphere was absolutely serene, there wasn't a single clue that someone was on the verge of death earlier, besides the torn fabric and bloody grass a couple yards to the left of everyone. And what is that? The calm and patient voice asks, seeking to satisfy his curiosity. The warm smile still pointed at the two catgirls, renewed their blushes. Despite the fact that women have a large part to play in most of my recent bads, they also play a large part of the goods as well. Lucifer's descendant raised an eyebrow to this. What do you mean? Raynor was the reason I died, yes, but it was also because of her that I met Rias and were given a second chance at life, despite the way it occurred so far. All of the training and sacrifice, hellish and gruesome as it was, has given me the strength to make it to this day. If the results were any less, I can't positively say I would be standing here right now. The fights I had with Raynor, Riser, Kakabiel, you and Fenrir were painful, and some even left me honor through death's door, but they built my character up and made me realize that the only things worth having are those I fought for. But the things, the relationships you built, the people that you fought to protect betrayed you. And it was, and still is, the worst pain I have ever felt. I made a mistake trying to return to a normal life when I cut Drake out of my arm, and I paid the price for it. An eternity of silence and solitude with my broken soul. That was my fate. Until you guys came. You aside, I was saved by women. If Shirin hadn't given up her purity to perform bedroom arts to keep me alive, I would have died before you and Kuroka showed up. But you weren't dying. You were going into a state of suspended animation. You would not be dead. I wouldn't really be alive either. Point. Anyway, without the two of you, I wouldn't have gotten the idea to host Ophis, who took on a female form, and it was because of her that I am the way I am right now. So, what you are trying to say is that you don't feel anything negative for Shirin, Kuroka, or Ophis. Correct? What about the other girls? The ones in your old peerage? Or the ones in the human educational facility you attend? That is kind of complicated. Issei's lips curved down at the thought. Now that he had calmed down, he didn't regret what he did. His love for Rias, Akeno, Asia, Zenobia, and Irina, his companionship with Gaspar and Kiba, no longer existed. On the other hand, if it wasn't for them, he wouldn't have been put into this situation which was both good and bad. Bad because no one should be verbally abused by the people they love and good cause of the results that came with it. He managed to host one of the strongest beings in known creation, and, after 1 century passed, he would be as strong Ophis. No. Even stronger. The girls at school, however, was a simple matter. All he had to do was curb the perverted tendencies, and little by little his reputation should rise. Honestly, Vali, I don't know. I don't feel like going all manhunter on the peerage and exacting revenge, but at the same time I won't tolerate their presence either. Is that so? Despite the somewhat stoic expression he wore on the outside, Vali's head was churning. If there was one thing he could say about his rival with absolutely certainty, it was that Issei Haidu was not normal by any sense of the word. If he had been as weak as him at the time and went through a similar ordeal, he would have sought strength simply to crush them into submission. But Issei was willing to let them live their lives unabated. Was he always like this? Or did something happen to him when he cut Drag out of his soul? Hey Vali, Kuroka. Issei, calling Vali out of his thoughts while the girls finally stood after Issei turned them to jelly and walked over. Your main combat skills revolve around magic, right? Do you think you can teach me more about it? Is my rival planning on getting even stronger? Vali thought, almost giddy at how far he would have to push himself to keep up. Magic? Kuroka asked, having recovered from her Issei-induced emotional overload. Why do you want to learn magic? Aren't you what the devils call a power class? Someone who fights with his own body. I was, yeah. The Ouroboros confided. And I was fine with that. But now, for some reason, I can't help but want to have more in my arsenal besides my crappy fighting and poor swordsmanship. The only spells I have are Dress Break and the Boob, you know what, I'm changing that to bilingual. Certainly, sounds better than that joke of a name. Vali nodded in approval. Ditto. Shirin followed suit and did the same. Anyway, Issei said. I feel like my fists won't be enough anymore. Besides, I always did admire how much magic Vali could use at once. Even Kuroka, who can bend space to her will for a short period like when we first met. Both the half-devil and Black Nekomata exchanged looks before their lips curved up. Well, we certainly don't mind. Kuroka informed him. You do realize that magic of our level won't be learned overnight, right? I have 100 years before I can use Ophis' full powers safely. Might as well put it to good use. But, is there a way to compress a century into a shorter amount of time? The dragon asked. If such an option is available, I would prefer that than waiting for an actual 100 years. Compressing time? Vali, amused by this method of thinking, could not help but get himself involved in this conversation. Getting stronger in a short amount of time was the ideal in his point of view. If he wanted any chance to continue being Issei's rival, this was the minimum requirement. Why do you think you can fit 100 years into a smaller period of time? Kuroka could not help her curiosity. Dragon Ball Z. I'm sorry, what? Needless to say, not a single one of them knew what Issei was talking about. In retrospect, this made sense. Not a single one of them spared time for humane entertainments. At least, Issei didn't think they did. A fictional story a human by the name of Akira Toriyama created. In it, there was an alternate dimension where, if you stood in said dimension, time moved 365 times faster than that of Earth. The whole year in 24 hours. Vali, being the battle maniac that he was, could not help but hope that such a place actually existed. All the training he could do, the strength he could acquire, the element of surprise when he fought against opponents that kept getting away from him. Cow. Correct. Haidu confirmed. Well, that certainly did sound like the ideal place to get training done. It was a work of fiction. They did not have access to this dimension. Unless. You want to know if there is something similar to this fictional dimension in reality? Yeah. I haven't been a part of the supernatural for long, so I honestly don't know if such a place exists. It does. Ophis interjected. Wait, it does. Kuroka and Vali could not believe their ears. True, Ophis knew the dimensional gap better than they did, so there was no point doubting her words. What really drove the stack into their hearts was that there was a place where they could make literal jumps in power, had access to it, and simply because they didn't take a fictional story seriously, they lost out on the strength they could have had. All they had to do was ask their charge, and it would have been theirs. Needless to say, both of them were disappointed at the vast quantity of missed opportunities. Indeed. Ophis continued on. Did you actually think that heaven, hell, and earth were the only dimensions that are separated by the dimensional gap? Now that the humanoids thought about it, it did sound rather stupid. Wow, Ophis. Issei smiled down at his arm, you certainly are useful. Of course, I am. Surely, they were hearing this wrong, but did she sound smug? Not only am I knowledgeable about my old home, I can provide you with all the energy you can ask for, so you never have to worry about running out of power. Sure, you can't use it all at once, but there isn't a problem about continuously giving you what you can manage. While the wielder of the infinity gear was smiling at his arm in gratitude, the other three simply stared at him. What? He asked, noticing their blank stares. Having Ophis is cheating. Kuroka told him. I agree. Vali voiced. This coming from the descendant of the original Lucifer who had the power of divine dividing. Issei deadpanned. And the Nekashu who has access to time-space manipulation. I stick by my words. Said Nekashu stubbornly persisted. The Lucifer just smiled and relented. Vali. Kuroka. Ophis spoke aloud, gaining the attention of the mentioned people as well as the third. I also wish for you to teach my host all you are able. He cannot simply rely on a power that will not have complete control over for 100 years. Hey, I never said I was against training him, Naya. Kuroka spoke out. This is my chance to teach my sister as well, Naya. Me? Shirin took a few steps back. But, I don't. Shirin. The older sister interrupted her before she could even think of finishing her sentence. You were led to believe that Senjutsu is bad, Naya. Just like any power, while it is dangerous, it isn't something to cast aside. I will help you so that you can wield Senjutsu better than I can, Naya. Teaching the Welsh, Ouroboros dragon is simply icing on the cake. I am also interested to see how far you can go, Haidu. Vali could barely contain his excitement. Issei would grow into one of the strongest existences creation has ever known. Teaching him, training alongside him may be his only, if not best way, for him to fulfill his dream. The female feline of white was looking at the dragon with a curious expression from on the ground, where her elder sister had finally was snuggling into her lap for a cat nap. Issei senpai, can I ask a question? The brown-haired individual smiled at his cute kohai. Sure. What is it? Training plans aside, what do you plan on doing now? Your last dream was to become a harem king. But what about now? Kuroka mentally ceased the creation of training plans for the two of them, and Vali redirected his eyesight back to his rival, the two of them also curious as to what his motivation would be from now on. The former Red Dragon Emperor gave them a reply that none of them were prepared for. To do what I want. 1 month later in the occult research clubroom. The atmosphere was tense. The redhead female Gremory was sitting in her plush red chair with her fallen angel devil hybrid queen standing by her left, a platter being held under her breast with soft hands, having served her king some tea. The both were downtrodden and ashamed of their actions and assumptions. If only they had not forgotten. The vampire sat on a couch closest to the mahogany desk that Rias sat at, taking Kaneko's previous spot, a worried and confused expression upon his face as he grasped the hem of his skirt. Next to him sat the failure of the Holy Sword project. He was also somewhat worried about the outcome of who he considered a friend's actions, fidgeting ever so slightly and tapping his right foot in a robotic manner. Across from the vampire sat the blue-haired excommunicated church member, the picture of perfect calm, a disguise for what she was truly feeling underneath her frontal bravado. She was scared that the man she wanted to bear children for would never again walk through the door of the orc. The bishop, who sat next to the female knight, did not attempt hiding her feelings and fears, sobbing into her palms yet again, unable to believe she had committed such a hideous act as betraying her first friend. All the members of the orc wore their respective school uniforms as school had yet to officially begin. They had about another 15 minutes before the first bell rang. Apart from Asia, all the members of the orc were facing the three leaders of the great factions, who stood at the other end of the room. Michael was dressed in his normal attire consisting of golden shoulder armor, a red top with black coloring on the sides of his waist, and a matching kilt-like clothing with a white fabric and a yellow cross presented on the front. His smile was non-existent, a sign that the news he brought was not going to be pleasant. Azazel was dressed in his school clothing. A gray undershirt with a red tie and a darker shirt covered by a buttoned-up blue dress shirt that went trailed down to his knees in the back. He also wore velvet pants and black dress shoes. The leader of the fallen angels had his prophetelic head running through his hair, a tired and exhausted expression upon his face, not a good sign in the slightest. Lastly, Serziches stood before his little sister and her peerage in his normal Satan attire, consisting of silver shoulder plates with an indigo cape and a shirt of sage and snow with pants of corn silk. His crimson hair came down to his shoulders and a troubled expression upon his face. The fact that the leaders of the three great factions being together in one area was of enough significance, but for all of them to appear in such a worried manner was most concerning. Have you had any luck finding them? Rias asked her older brother, hoping that they would have some good news to share with her. Unfortunately, this was not the case. Sorry Rias, but for some reason we cannot locate him. The Satan told his little sister, feeling the bitter sensation of being the bearer of bad news. I went to Ajuka to see if he found anything, but he told me that Konkio's and Issei's pieces are not releasing the signal we need to track them. He also doesn't know what is causing them to stop. We could very well be looking at one of the first evil piece malfunctions in centuries. This got the attention of not only the whole peerage, but of Azazel and Michael, apparently not privy to the information being disclosed. The evil pieces are capable of malfunctioning. Michael asked, unsure if the angel reincarnation system that was based on the evil P system was in perfect condition. Azazel seemed to notice this and attempted to quiet his friend's fears. I highly doubt that anything is wrong with the system itself, Michael. Remember that this is Issei we are talking about here. He always seems to be at the center of the strangest events. It just so happens that Kaneko was taken along for the ride, quite literally. His attempt at humor fell on deaf ears. Indeed. Serziches affirmed Azazel's assumption while ignoring the joke made in poor taste. There is nothing wrong with the evil P system itself, Ajuka guaranteed me of that. If I had to guess, the pieces inside of Issei and Kaneko are being suppressed. If I am right, then whatever is suppressing the rook and 8 mutated pawns must be monstrous. The room was as quiet as a grave after hearing that statement, afraid of what could possibly be blocking that tracking signal. While I am not saying you are wrong, Serziches, I can think of some other scenarios that may be taking place. Since I have nothing to back up what I say, however, I'll do a little bit of digging on my own and let you know what I find. Please do. I will also do some investigating from heaven. If they are on this planet, we will find them. Your help is much appreciated, Michael. Well then, I am afraid this is all I have time for today. I must get back to the underworld and try to explain the disappearance of the Red Dragon Emperor to the council. Without warning, an Ashen magic circle appeared by the Satan's ear. Oh, Graphia. Has something happened? Okay. I understand. Wait, she did what? Oh, hell no, not again. Damn it, Seraphol, when I get my hands on you. But that last outburst, the Crimson Satan left the clubroom with a flash of a magic circle. Ha ha. Seems like the Leviathan left her paperwork for Serziches again. As entertaining as it would be to watch the two Satans run around the underworld, I have to get back to Grigori. And I must return to heaven. I wish the best to you all, Rias and friends. With that, the two biblical beings vanished into their respective magic circles. The remaining students felt downtrodden, hoping to have some good news when they were called here. We really messed up, didn't we? Kiba asked no one in particular, the silence becoming unbearable for the night of Gremory. We were too focused on what our king wanted. Zenobia added, saddened by the news that was presented to them. We didn't even think of Issei. And because of my selfishness, he is now listed as a stray devil and can very well be dead. Rias sobbed, tears starting to overflow from her eyes. If Yufu, I wouldn't be too sure about that, Rias. Akeno, who was feeling rather depressed, had moved from her king's side to gaze out the window and lament. Only to have her negativity completely replaced with sheer happiness and amusement. The rest of the peerage seemed to notice the instant reverse in emotion, standing up to look out of some of the other windows to see what had cheered up the queen so quickly. What are you looking at to have you change your mood so quickly, Akeno? Rias asked the same question that was in everyone's mind before standing from her chair to look out the window that Akeno stood in front of. Why, that handsome and mischievous devil right there. The lightning priestess pointed at a certain individual that was walking into the school grounds. Following the direction that the girl's digit was pointing, the club members instantly found the object of their queen's reversal in mood. Issei was back. XXX. A couple minutes earlier. Issei was walking towards the schoolyard towards his classroom. He had left the Vali group about an hour ago via Ophis' personal teleportation circle. The remaining time he had before arriving at school he spent wandering the small town he resided in, seeing everything in a new light after becoming a dragon. Remember, Issei, now that you are a full dragon, you will attract a lot of attention, both good and bad. However, no one can sense the infinite. People who knew you before will know that you changed, but will not be able to decipher how, even the other supernatural species. No one will know that you host me until you reveal me to them. Okay. He replied. That helps calm me down a little bit. Truth be told, the host of the Ouroboros dragon was nervous. While he had all of the energy of infinity at his disposal and a tougher body, that did not make him omnipotent. Right now, in his base form, he had all of the abilities and stats of the Welsh Dragon Balance Breaker, thanks to Ophis literally copying the Balance Breaker's specs that were ingrained into his soul and memories, integrating them into their new body. Yet, here he was in the Gremory's territory where the 4 super devils and their peerages could show up at any second alongside Azazel and Michael, with their respective army of angels. Quell your worries, young one. Ophis spoke softly from his left hand. Azazel and Serziches attempted to fight me when you went berserk, and they were not even worth my attention. You will be fine. If it makes you feel any better, I will even let you use that. This caused the boy's eyebrows to rise in shock and surprise. Now he felt even better about being here, cocky even. He was under the assumption that the infinite dragon god would not let him access her power unless it was truly necessary. Thanks, Ophis, I really appreciate this. Do you want the usual in return? Do I even need to ask? This earned a small chortle from the dragon, already knowing what the being he hosted would say. After what was a rather enjoyable stroll through town, they finally came across the familiar brick wall on their right. There was also a growing number of people wearing the exact same style of clothes. Fancy black button-up shirt with a white undershirt and black pants, red skirt. Some of these people were giving him an eye too. Hey, isn't that one of the perverted trio? One girl asked a group of friends who Issei had passed. No way. Isn't that Issei Haidu? You know, the boy who has been missing for a month. One of them asked. God damn, he is hot. What happened to him in the last month? Did he always look like that? And thus, the draconic attraction has begun. The boy couldn't help a small chuckle. When he became the host of the Welsh Dragon, there really wasn't much of a change. Now, it seemed everyone was taking notice of him. Heads were turning, people were whispering to each other, some were even pointing. Without a doubt, Issei was unable to help but wonder how fast this wildfire was going to spread. Finally entering the courtyard did he finally start seeing faces he recognized. A young girl with a chocolate ponytail combined with two twin tails falling down just in front of her ears, tied with two ruby red ribbons. Her amber golden eyes were looking over at him in a dirty look. She definitely looked familiar, but for some reason he couldn't quite pick out her name or the relationship he had with her. Trying to be friendly, he waved over at the girl only to earn a blink, a scoff, and the shoulder as she walked away. Obviously not a good one. Other than the occasional comment about his return and how good he looked now, things went relatively peaceful. He was surprised that no one from the occult research club came up to him yet. While Issei wasn't looking forward to it, the boy was certain his presence here would at least cause a ripple among the Grimory and Citri peerages. Finally, the 1-minute bell rang, signaling all students they only had 60 seconds to make it to class before they were tardy. What is that annoying sound? Ophis groaned, trying to get a small cat nap before the sound of the bell disturbed her rest. If I hear it again, I will destroy it. You will be hearing it quite a bit, so I would appreciate it if you don't do that. No response. Wondering if the other part of his soul was serious, he made his way to class in a somewhat quick manner. He walked in with a few seconds to spare. Not bothering to say hello to anyone, he casually walked towards an empty seat and sat down. Placing his bag on the floor, he faced the front of the class only to see a very surprised teacher. The silence also became noticeably heavy, all of the students who did not hear the gossip of his return despite his tone were shocked into silence. Haidu. The teacher exclaimed, shocked not only because the missing student had returned, but the loud voice had startled her. Where have you been? You have been absent for nearly a month. I was injured in a gas explosion as I was walking home. The student easily lied. He had been thinking up this excuse for a little while now, so it slipped off his tongue effortlessly. I only recovered about a week ago. My skin still itches though. To emphasize this, he lightly scratched at his left arm. Well, I am sorry to hear that, but you cannot just come back to class like this without having the proper paperwork. But sensei, the paperwork should already be on your desk. No one noticed the boy's eyes flashed the shade of indigo for a moment. Doubting his words, the homeroom teacher cast a quick glance over his desk and quickly found a sheet of paper that he could have sworn was not there earlier. So it is. Very well then, let's get class started. Thus, began the start of his introduction back into the human world. The lesson was just as boring as he had remembered, if not more so to his great disappointment and boredom. However, he couldn't quite just sit in his desk and do literally nothing. He couldn't remember anything regarding the lessons or any possible homework. Thankfully for him, he still had the vast majority of the students' attention. Looking around the room, his eyes quickly flashed from chocolate brown to indigo purple with multiple students suddenly getting an itch in theirs. Now I am caught up with everything. With that taken care of, he pulled out a piece of paper and began scribbling on it, confident he can answer anything that was asked of him, so long as he kept one ear on the lecture. A few hours in, Issei could feel the dragon god inside him grow restless. This is school? Ophis asked, bored out of her mind to the point where she was getting restless. It isn't very interesting. Why do you come here? Because the government insists that school is necessary to get a job, and a job is necessary to make money. Do you not have enough money from my treasury? This comment made the host want to slam his head into the desk. He should have thought his response out more. When he became Ophis' host, in between training sessions, they left a Klaxon dimension in order to go to a cave Ophis used to reside in while she was on Earth back in the time of the dinosaurs. She found lots of shiny things and, as it turns out, those shiny things were gold, silver, and a bunch of other precious minerals that sold for a lot of money. Issei had heard a fairy tale once where dragons like to collect treasure. Either that tale was true or just based off of Ophis, he didn't know yet. This, combined from his earnings from Ophis Dragon, he was pretty much set for several lifetimes. As he was drawing out a circle with a various number of symbols on it, the teacher suddenly spoke up. Alright class. Who can name off some of the Greek gods? At least it wasn't a stupid question like solve this equation. Taking a break from his doodling, Issei looked around the room to see the other students doing something similar. Unbeknownst to him, the girl he saw earlier today was also sitting in the back of the class. As everyone was looking to see if anyone would volunteer to answer the question, the girl met Issei's eyes again. This time, the reaction was quite the look of disgust followed by a HMPH. The hell is her problem? That female. Ophis, driven out of the catnap Kuroka practically forced her to learn, took an interest in the girl who seemed to hate his guts. What about her? She feels different from the other humans here. Now that was surprising. Ophis taking an interest in a human. She didn't feel like a devil, yokai, vampire, or angel, fallen or otherwise. That could only mean one thing. The sacred gear. Well, I'll be damned. What about you, Murayama? The girl that had caught the interest of the dragon god in him shook her head, unable to answer the question. Now Issei had a name for the face. Murayama. That does sound familiar. Wasn't there a Murayama in the kendo club who beat me up during my less than ethical days? This is her? I see. What about you, Caddis? The girl next to her, one with hair that was neither orange or brown and matching eyes, also shook her head. That one too. Another one? How many did Rias miss? Or is it that they haven't shown signs that devils can recognize? There is a third. Over there by the window. The window? Oh dear lord, it's Kiryu. You remember that one? Kind of hard to forget that one. Really? No can name a single Olympic god. The man who stood at the head of the class sounded as disappointed as Issei incredulous. 3 sacred gears and not a single devil was aware. That was just ridiculous. Issei, I want you to answer the question this boy is asking. Huh? Me? Why? I want to see how much of our lessons you are able to remember. The Ophis seemed to be fully awake now. While he was more than capable of answer such an easy question, he still found it strange that it wanted him to have some limelight poured on him. Deciding to inquire as to why later, the Uruburo stood from his chair, garnering the attention of the teacher and his classmates. He ignored the looks that were on him, 2 of them glaring while another one was hard to place. Walking past the teacher, he grabbed a piece of chalk and started writing on the board. That's it guys. Thanks for watching and supporting us. See you in the next part.